The police arrived at my house before sunrise. 3 patrol cars stopped outside, their red and blue lights flashing across my bedroom walls. For a few seconds, I thought something terrible had happened to my son. I was right. I just didn't understand that I was the terrible thing he had reported. My name is Harold Bennett. I was 68 years old then, living alone in a modest house outside Columbus, Ohio. My wife had passed away 6 years earlier, and my only son, Nathan, was the last close family I had left. That was why, when he called me the night before and asked me to come over, I went without hesitation. Nathan and his wife, Claire, had been married for 3 years. Their marriage looked perfect from the outside. Beautiful house, expensive cars, elegant photographs on social media. But whenever I visited, I sensed tension. Claire rarely spoke during dinner. Nathan answered questions for her. If she tried to tell a story, he interrupted. If she laughed too loudly, he stared at her until she stopped. I noticed these things. I simply never imagined how far my son was willing to go to protect the life he wanted people to see. That evening, Nathan said he needed help repairing a loose shelf in his study. I brought my old toolbox and arrived around 7. Claire barely looked at me when she opened the door. Her eyes were swollen as though she had been crying. "Are you all right?" I asked. Before she could answer, Nathan appeared behind her. "She's fine," he said quickly. "We've just had a long day." I followed him upstairs. The shelf took less than 10 minutes to fix, yet Nathan kept finding reasons for me to stay. First, he asked me to inspect a cabinet. Then he wanted help moving a desk. Finally, he brought me a cup of coffee and insisted I sit down. It felt strange. Nathan had spent the previous year avoiding me. Now suddenly he didn't want me to leave. At around 9, Claire walked into the room. "My ring is missing," she said. Nathan stood immediately. "What ring?" She stared at him. "My wedding ring." For one brief second, something passed between them. Fear, not surprise. Fear. Nathan began searching drawers and cushions. Then he turned to me. "Dad, did you see it?" "No." Claire pressed both hands against her mouth. "It was on my dressing table." Nathan's expression hardened. "Who else has been upstairs?" The question made the room feel smaller. I looked at him carefully. "You know who has been upstairs." He stared at me for several seconds, then forced a nervous laugh. "I'm only asking." We searched for another 20 minutes. The ring was nowhere. When I finally left, Nathan followed me to the front porch. "Dad," he said quietly, "you still have money problems, don't you?" I stopped walking. "I manage. The house needs repairs, medical bills. Things add up." I felt insulted but remained calm. "What are you trying to say?" "Nothing." But he wouldn't meet my eyes. The next morning, police officers searched my home. Nathan stood beside the lead detective, refusing to look at me. Claire remained inside one of the patrol cars. An officer opened my toolbox. Then he went silent. He reached beneath a tray of rusted screws and lifted a small velvet box. Inside it was Claire's wedding ring. The same ring Nathan claimed was worth $28,000. I stared at it, unable to breathe. "That isn't mine," I whispered. Nathan finally looked at me. His face showed no shock, no confusion, only disappointment carefully arranged for the police. "Dad," he said, "how could you do this to us?" And in that moment, I realized my son had not called the police because he believed I stole the ring. He had called them because he knew exactly where they would find it. The police officer placed the velvet box inside an evidence bag. I kept staring at Nathan, waiting for him to stop the performance. He didn't. "Tell them," I said quietly. Nathan lowered his eyes. "Tell them you asked me to bring that toolbox to your house last night." The detective turned toward him. "Is that true?" Nathan hesitated for exactly the right amount of time. "My father brings it whenever he repairs something." That wasn't my question. Nathan swallowed. "Yes, I asked him to bring it." For one hopeful second, I thought the truth might save me. Then Nathan added, "But I never touched it." The detective looked at me. "Mr. Bennett, did anyone have access to your toolbox after you returned home?" "No." "So the ring was inside a locked house in a toolbox belonging to you?" "I didn't put it there." Claire finally stepped out of the patrol car. She walked towards us slowly, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm morning air. Her face was pale, and she avoided looking directly at me. "Claire," I said, "you know I would never steal from you." Her lips trembled. I expected her to defend me. Instead, she whispered, "I trusted you." Those 3 words hurt more than the handcuffs. The police arrested me in my own driveway, while neighbors watched through their curtains. Nathan stood beside Claire with one arm around her shoulders, playing the devoted husband whose family had been betrayed. As an officer guided me into the patrol car, I looked back at my son. He finally met my eyes. There was no guilt in them, only relief. At the police station, I told the same story again and again. Nathan had invited me over. He kept me in the house longer than necessary. Claire announced that her ring was missing. Nathan asked about my financial problems. The next morning, the ring appeared inside my toolbox. To me, the pattern was obvious. To the detectives, it sounded like a desperate father blaming his successful son. My lawyer, a tired public defender named Paul Mercer, listened carefully but warned me that the evidence was damaging. "The ring was found in your possession," he said. "It wasn't in my possession, it was planted in my house." "Can you prove that?" "No." "Did anyone see Nathan touch the toolbox?" "No." "Are there cameras inside his house?" "Nathan said they weren't working." Paul leaned back in his chair. "And you do have unpaid medical debts?" "My wife was sick for 3 years." "And you recently received a notice that your mortgage payments were behind?" I said nothing. He rubbed his forehead. "The prosecution will say you saw an opportunity. They'll argue that you took the ring, hid it in your toolbox, and planned to sell it later." "But I didn't. I believe you." His expression told me belief was not enough. The trial began 4 months later. Nathan sat behind the prosecutor every day. He wore dark suits, held Claire's hand, and looked at me with carefully measured sadness whenever the jury entered the courtroom. The prosecution displayed photographs of my damaged roof, my aging car, and stacks of medical bills left from my wife's treatment. They didn't present me as a violent criminal. They presented me as a desperate old man who had made one terrible decision. That version was easier for the jury to believe. Then Claire testified. She described leaving the ring on her dressing table before I arrived. She said I had asked several questions about its value during a previous visit. That wasn't true. I had once complimented the ring because it had belonged to her grandmother. The prosecutor transformed that memory into motive. "Did the defendant know the ring was worth approximately $28,000? He asked. Claire looked at me. "Yes." "Did anyone else enter your bedroom that evening?" "No." "Did you give Mr. Bennett permission to take the ring?" "No." Her voice broke at exactly the right moment. I realized she had rehearsed every answer. When Nathan took the witness stand, he was even more convincing. He spoke about my debts. He said I had become withdrawn after my wife died. He claimed I once told him I would do anything to save my home. That statement was partly true. I had said I would do anything honest. He conveniently removed the last word. My lawyer asked why Nathan had kept me at the house for nearly 2 hours after the repair was finished. Nathan smiled sadly. "Because he's my father. I was trying to spend time with him." "Hadn't you avoided him for most of the previous year?" "I was busy." "Did you place the ring inside his toolbox?" "No." "Did you report the theft because you wanted control of your father's house?" The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained it. Nathan stepped down without ever losing his composure. I was found guilty after 3 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced me to 2 years in prison. Before officers led me away, I turned towards Nathan. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten him. I only asked one question. "Why?" His face changed for half a second. Then he leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "You should have signed the house over when I asked." That was when I finally understood. Months earlier, Nathan had pressured me to transfer ownership of my home to him. He said it would protect the property from creditors, but I refused. The house wasn't valuable because of money. It was the home where his mother had raised him. He knew I would never willingly give it away, so he had found another way to remove me. Prison took nearly everything. My freedom, my reputation, my home. While I was incarcerated, Nathan convinced a court that the property needed to be sold to cover my legal debts. My furniture was removed, my wife's belongings disappeared, and the house was purchased through a company connected to one of Nathan's business partners. I wrote to Claire 6 times. She never replied. I wrote to Nathan once. The letter contained only one sentence. You may have taken my home, but someday the truth will take yours. For 2 years, I survived by holding on to that belief. Then, on the morning of my release, the prison gates opened. No one was waiting for me. I carried everything I owned inside a small plastic bag and walked 3 miles to the nearest bus stop. Before leaving town, I visited an old pawn shop where I had once sold my wife's antique watch to help pay her medical bills. The owner, Mr. Alvarez, recognized me immediately. His smile disappeared. "Harold?" I nodded. I heard what happened. So did everyone. He studied my face, then locked the shop door. "There is something I should have shown the police," he said. My heart began beating faster. He disappeared into the back room and returned holding a faded receipt. At the top was a description of a diamond wedding ring. At the bottom was a signature, Nathan Bennett, and the date on the receipt was 3 days before he told police the ring had been stolen. For several seconds I couldn't speak. I stared at the faded receipt as though it might disappear if I blinked. The date was unmistakable, 3 days before Claire had reported her wedding ring stolen. Mr. Alvarez pointed to the signature at the bottom. "I remember him," he said quietly. "He said the ring belonged to his wife and that they needed quick cash for an investment. I offered to buy it, but he changed his mind after I printed the receipt. He took the ring back and left. I kept the paperwork because every cancelled transaction stays in my records." I felt my knees weaken. For 2 years I had replayed that night over and over, wondering if I had missed something. Now I knew. The theft had never happened. Nathan already had the ring before the police ever searched my house. He hadn't been looking for justice. He had been creating evidence. Mr. Alvarez reached beneath the counter again and handed me a photocopy. "I heard about your conviction a week later," he said. "When I realized it was the same ring, I searched my files. I tried calling the detective assigned to your case, but nobody ever returned my calls." I carefully folded the receipt and slipped it into my jacket pocket. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't carrying hope. I was carrying proof. As I stepped outside the pawn shop, my old mobile phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I answered. "Mr. Bennett?" a calm voice asked. "Yes. My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm an investigative reporter." She paused before saying the words that would change everything. "I have been looking into your conviction, and I think your son has been hiding much more than a wedding ring.